October rain pounded on the roof of the small flower shop on the corner of Maple Street. Alice Donovan checked the bouquets in the window one last time, trying to keep her hands busy. The day was surprisingly empty. The weather had driven all the customers away. "Can we close early today?" Rose, an elderly assistant, asked as she wiped the counter. "There's no one here anyway, no," Alice replied gently. "Mrs. Gardner ordered a bouquet for her 5th birthday. She never misses." Alice straightened a strand of brown hair that had fallen out of a simple bun. At 26, she had been working at Flower Paradise for 4 years. After her parents died in a car accident, this shop became her salvation and new home. The bell above the door suddenly jangled. A tall man in an expensive dark gray suit entered the shop. His face seemed tense and his eyes were tired. "Good afternoon," Alice greeted him. "How can I help you?" The man looked around the store in silence, as if he didn't know why he had come in the first place. He stumbled. "I was just looking to wait out the rain, if that's okay." Alice looked at the visitor carefully. Something in his posture, in the way he held his shoulders, spoke of a heavy burden. "Of course," she nodded. "You can have a seat right here." Rose gave Alice a warning look. She didn't trust strangers, especially those so well dressed. But Alice felt that this man just needed a moment of peace. The man sat down on the offered chair, pulled out his phone, and began to scroll through something. His eyebrows were tensely drawn together, and his fingers nervously tapped the screen. "You know," Alice suddenly said, walking over to a vase of simple white chrysanthemums, "they say flowers sometimes speak better than words." She quickly assembled a small bouquet, adding a few sprigs of fern. "Here you go." She handed the bouquet to the visitor. "It's a gift." The man looked up in surprise. "What? But why?" "Because sometimes we all need a little beauty in our lives," Alice answered simply. "Especially on such a gloomy day." He looked at the bouquet for a long time, as if not knowing how to react to such an unexpected gesture. "Thank you," he finally said. "This is unexpected." The rain outside the window began to subside. The man stood up, still holding the bouquet as if he didn't know what to do with it. "Have a nice day." Alice smiled. He nodded and left the shop without even introducing himself. "Are you out of your mind?" Rose immediately attacked. "You gave the bouquet away for nothing." Alice shrugged her shoulders. "Sometimes you just have to do good, Rose, for no reason." She couldn't have known that this simple gesture would change her life. She couldn't know that the man in the gray suit was William Kingsley, the owner of one of the city's largest construction companies, and that he would come back. He would definitely come back. Alice was sitting at an old wooden table in the back of the store, spreading out the invoices. The numbers on the paper merged before her eyes, and her head throbbed with tension. 3,000 for rent, 2 for suppliers, and another 1,500 for utilities. She rubbed her temples tiredly. "Up late again?" Rose appeared in the doorway, holding a cup of hot tea. "I'm trying to figure out how to get through this month," Alice admitted, gratefully accepting the drink. "Maybe we should raise our prices," Rose suggested cautiously. "We can't keep working at a loss forever." Alice shook her head. She knew her friend was right, but raising prices meant losing half of her regular customers, mostly elderly people who bought flowers for their loved ones at the cemetery. "I can't," she replied quietly. "You know our customers. Mrs. Peterson can barely make ends meet, but she buys roses for her husband's grave every week, and old Mr. Green—" "Alice," Rose interrupted, "you can't save everyone. Your parents wouldn't want you to bankrupt yourself." The memory of her parents pierced her heart. This store was their dream. They opened it 20 years ago with all their savings. Flower Paradise flourished until that terrible accident took them both. Alice was 21 when she inherited the business. Although she knew nothing about finance, she vowed to keep her father's business alive. "I'll figure something out," she whispered, more to herself than to Rose. "Maybe I'll take on some extra work in the evenings." "You work 7 days a week as it is." Rose was indignant. "When was the last time you had a proper vacation?" Alice didn't answer. She couldn't remember. Across town, in a luxurious penthouse apartment, William Kingsley couldn't sleep either. He tossed and turned in bed, remembering the strange girl from the flower shop. Her sincere smile and unexpected gift never left his mind. White chrysanthemums stood in a vase on his desk. Simple flowers seemed out of place among the expensive designer furniture, but they brought something alive and real to this sterile space. In the morning, instead of the usual trip to the office, William ordered the driver to stop at Flower Paradise. For some reason, his heart beat faster when he saw the light in the windows of the shop. The bell above the door greeted him again with its melodious sound. Alice was standing behind the counter, arranging a bouquet of red carnations. Hearing the visitor, she looked up and froze for a moment. "Good morning," William said, trying to sound casual. "I need a bouquet for my mother." "Good morning," Alice replied, her eyes warming a little. "What mood do you want to convey with the bouquet?" William was at a loss. He had been ordering expensive bouquets for his mother for years through his secretary without even thinking about their meaning. I don't know. Something tender, I guess." "Tell me about your mom," Alice asked, putting down the carnations. "What was she like?" And suddenly, William began to tell about how his mother always supported his dreams, how she believed in him when he was just starting his business, how she still invites him to lunch every Sunday, even though he often refuses because of work. Alice listened attentively while picking the bouquet. Her hands moved confidently and gracefully, combining pale pink peonies with white freesias and greenery. "Peonies symbolize love and care," she explained as she worked, "and freesias will add tenderness and warmth. I think your mom will appreciate it." "You have an amazing eye for flowers," William said. "It's my parents," Alice smiled, but her eyes flashed with sadness. "They taught me that every flower has its own story, its own character." "And where are they now?" William asked, sensing that he was touching on a painful topic. Alice froze for a moment, her hand stopped. "They died 5 years ago." William felt something tighten in his chest at the sound of her soft voice. "I'm sorry," he said sincerely. "It's okay." Alice went back to work. "They left me this shop. It's like a piece of them." When she finished the bouquet, she carefully wrapped it in a transparent film and tied it with a ribbon. "How much do I owe you?" William asked, pulling out his wallet. $45, Alice answered. It was a ridiculous amount of money for someone of his means, but he noticed the way she hesitated to say the price, as if apologizing. "You know," he said, handing her 50, "keep the rest for yourself. You gave me a bouquet yesterday, now it's my turn." Alice blushed, but it was nothing. William interrupted her. "Goodbye, Alice." He had read her name on her badge and now enjoyed the sound of it. "Goodbye," she replied, and he heard something like hope in her voice. As he left the store, William knew he would be back. He would definitely come back. "You're just not capable of real feelings, William. All you care about are your contracts, your meetings, and the numbers in your reports." Olivia's words still echoed in his head, haunting him even in his own office on the 42nd floor. William rubbed his eyes tiredly, pushing his laptop away. On the rainy day he first walked into Flower Paradise, Olivia had finally ended their 2-year relationship. "I can't be with a man who can only talk about business and profits. I need a man, not a walking corporation." Perhaps she was right. At the age of 35, he had achieved everything he could dream of. His own construction empire, a fortune that allowed him to buy almost anything he wanted. But he had no special desires left. Except for one, to see that sincere smile of the girl from the flower shop again. "Mr. Kingsley," the voice of his secretary on the intercom interrupted his thoughts. "We have an investor meeting in 15 minutes. Cancel it," he suddenly said. "I have an important meeting." On the other side of town, Alice was just finishing up a wedding order when the bell rang to announce another visitor. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw the familiar silhouette. "Another bouquet for Mom?" She smiled, wiping her hands on her apron. "Yes," William nodded. "She really liked your peonies last time." He had been coming for the third week in a row, always at the same time, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Alice noticed that she looked forward to these visits more than she should. "Today I'm offering something special," she said as she walked between the rows of flowers. "See these lilies? They are called Starry Night. It's a very rare variety." "You always know such interesting details," William said, watching her movements. "They're all from my dad's journals," Alice replied, carefully cutting the stems. "He's been collecting them for years. Sometimes, when I can't sleep, I flip through them and read about different varieties of flowers." "Do you often stay awake?" He sounded genuinely concerned. "Lately, yes," she admitted. "I think about a lot of things." She didn't mention the bills that were piling up on her desk, the letter from the bank warning her of possible debt collection, the fact that she had been late in paying Rose, who understood and didn't complain. "You know," William suddenly said, "I don't sleep much either. I think that life is somehow passing me by, like I'm stuck in some kind of vicious circle." Alice looked up at him. There was so much unspoken pain in his gaze that she just wanted to take his hand. "Sometimes we all need a break," she said softly. "Even flowers don't bloom all year round. They have a dormant period, a time to gather strength." William looked at her, feeling something inside him begin to melt. Alice was so easy to talk to. She knew how to listen without judgment and find simple but apt words. Have you ever thought about taking a vacation?" he asked. "Maybe a walk in the park or a cup of coffee?" Alice froze, holding the unfinished bouquet. Her cheeks turned slightly pink. "Are you asking me out? William suddenly felt insecure, like a teenager. "Yes, that is, if you don't mind." At that moment, his phone rang. The screen read, "Urgent, Board of Directors." William disconnected the call in frustration. "Is it an important call?" Alice asked, noticing his reaction. "Nothing urgent," he lied. "So how about some coffee?" Alice hesitated. She knew almost nothing about the man, except that he bought flowers for her mother and had some kind of important job, judging by the suits and constant calls. "I can't leave the shop for long," she said. "Rose took off early today." "Then I'll bring the coffee here," William persisted. "I'll be back in 15 minutes. He left, leaving Alice at a loss. Her heart was pounding and her hands were shaking a little as she finished the bouquet of lilies. 15 minutes later, William returned with 2 cups of coffee and a bag of fresh croissants. "I didn't know what kind of coffee you like, so I got a latte," he said as he put everything on the counter. "You guessed right," Alice smiled. "That's exactly what I drink." They talked for almost an hour. Alice talked about her favorite flowers, about how she used to help her parents in the shop when she was a child. William talked about his mother, how she raised him alone after his father's death, and her love of gardening. He deliberately avoided the details of his work, afraid to ruin the special simplicity of their communication. With Alice, he could be just himself, not a successful businessman, not a millionaire, but an ordinary person. "I have to go," he finally said, looking at his watch. "Thank you for the coffee and the conversation." "Thank you," Alice replied, "and I'm sure my mom will love the lilies." As he left the shop, William knew he had lied twice. The coffee wasn't about thanking her. It was just an excuse to be with her, and the lilies weren't meant for his mother. They would stand in his office, reminding him of the girl who, without knowing it, had begun to melt the ice around his heart. "Don't you find this strange?" Julia sat on an old sofa in Alice's apartment stirring her tea with a spoon. A man in an Armani suit buying flowers every week at a small shop in the neighborhood? Alice sighed. Julia had been her best friend since high school and now worked as a journalist for a local newspaper. Her professional suspicions sometimes crossed the line. Maybe he just likes our bouquets, Alice shrugged. What's the big deal? What's the big deal? Julia put her cup on the table. Alice, I saw his watch when I was passing the store. It's a Patek Philippe. It costs as much as your store, along with all the merchandise. People like that don't buy flowers in small shops. They order them from premium florists. Alice felt something stir in her chest. She had noticed William's expensive clothes and impeccable manners, but she tried not to think about it. We're just talking, she said quietly. He's an interesting man. Julia looked at her friend intently. Oh no, don't tell me you're… I'm what? Alice tensed. Falling in love with him, Julia exclaimed. Alice, we've been through this before. Do you remember Michael? Alice shuddered. 3 years ago, she had dated a man who introduced himself as a successful financier. It turned out that he was just a con artist trying to swindle her out of the money from the sale of her parents' house. William is not like that, she said firmly. He's different. William? Julia raised an eyebrow. So you're on a first-name basis now? What do you know about him? Alice thought about it. They had been talking for weeks, but she really didn't know much about him. He talked about his mom and his thoughts, but never about his work or his personal life. He buys flowers for Mom, she began. He likes cinnamon coffee. Is that all? Julia interrupted her. Alice, this man is hiding something, and as your friend, I can't just stand by. What do you mean? Alice was alarmed. I'm a journalist, remember? Julia took out her notebook. I have friends in different circles. I can find out who he really is. No, Alice said sharply. Don't even think about it. Why? Her friend did not back down. If he has nothing to hide, then there is nothing to worry about. Alice got up and went to the window. It was already dark outside, and the city lights were scattered like stars below. You know, she said quietly, when he comes to the store, everything becomes easier. We just talk. About flowers, about life, about everything. I don't want to ruin that. Julia came over and hugged her friend's shoulders. That's exactly what I'm afraid of, dear. That you're going too deep into this fairy tale and then it will hurt. I'm a big girl, Julia, Alice turned to her friend. I know what I'm doing. Really? Julia pulled out her phone and showed the photo. Then explain to me why your simple visitor is getting out of a Mercedes S-Class. I took this photo yesterday when I was driving by. Alice felt her heart skip a beat. The photo was indeed of William getting out of a luxury black car right in front of her shop. Maybe he was… She stuttered, not knowing what to say. Maybe he's not who he says he is, Julia finished softly. And I just want to protect you. From what? Alice asked tiredly. From the fact that someone finally sees me as more than just a flower girl? Oh, honey, Julia hugged her friend again. You are so much more than just a flower girl. You're the strongest person I know. After everything that happened to your parents, you didn't give up. You kept their business going. I'm barely holding on. Alice smiled bitterly. You know how difficult it is. That's why I'm worried, Julia said. I don't want anyone to take advantage of your vulnerability. Alice remained silent, looking out the window. Somewhere there, in the night city, was William. Who was he really? Why is he hiding the truth about himself? And most importantly, was Julia right about his intentions? Give me your word, she suddenly said, turning to her friend, that you won't check him out. At least not yet. Julia sighed heavily. Okay. But if I notice anything suspicious, then you'll tell me, Alice finished. And I'll decide what to do. They sat there for a long time talking about everything just like in the old days. But Alice's thoughts kept returning to William. Who is he? And why does her heart ache so much when she thinks of him? Meanwhile, in his penthouse, William looked out at the city at night and wondered how much longer he could hide the truth from the girl who had become a ray of light for him in the stifling world of big business. October was coming to an end. The evenings were getting colder and colder, and on this day William was especially worried as he watched Alice close the shop alone. Rose had left early because she was sick and she was alone. "It's getting dark," he said, watching her check the locks. "Let me give you a ride home." Alice froze for a moment, her hand still holding the keys. "Thanks, but I'm better off on my own. I'm used to it now. But it's cold outside and the neighborhood isn't the safest," William insisted, involuntarily surprised at her refusal. Alice turned to him, and in the dim light of the street lamps he saw a slight smile on her face. "You know, I've been walking this road every day for 5 years, and nothing terrible has happened." William felt unusually embarrassed. Over the past month he had gotten used to spending time with her in the store, talking about everything, but now for the first time he felt the wall she had built between them. "I just want to make sure you're safe," he tried again. "And I appreciate that," Alice replied softly. "But sometimes care can be excessive." There was something in her voice that made him think of what Olivia had said about him, trying to control everything. But it was different now. He just wanted to protect Alice. "You know," she suddenly said, buttoning her jacket, "you remind me of a hydrangea flower." "What?" He was confused by this unexpected comparison. Hydrangeas seem so big and lush, as if they want to protect all the smaller flowers around them. But sometimes other flowers need space to grow on their own. William looked at her, amazed at the depth of this simple comparison. In the month they had been talking, he had grown accustomed to her particular way of seeing the world through the prism of flowers, but this time she had hit the nail on the head. "I didn't mean to push," he said quietly. "I know," Alice nodded. "But you see, I don't even know who you really are." These words hurt him. He was so used to their simple conversation that he had almost forgotten his secret. "What do you mean?" he asked cautiously. "You come every week, always elegant, always impeccable. You buy flowers, you talk to me. But I know nothing about your life outside of this shop." There was no reproach in her voice, just a statement of fact. And that made it even harder. "Does it really matter?" He tried to smile. "Isn't it enough that we're happy together?" Alice shook her head. "Life is not a fairy tale, William. And I know all too well what happens when you trust strangers." "I'm not a stranger," he protested. "We've known each other for a month. And in that month you've never told me where you work, what you do, or why your suit costs more than my monthly income." William felt the cold evening wind chill his bones. Or was it not the wind, but the fear of losing what was special between them? "If I tell you, everything will change," he finally said. "Maybe," Alice agreed. "But isn't it better to know the truth?" She adjusted the bag on her shoulder and took a step back. "I have to go. Thank you for caring, but I really should go on my own." "Alice," he held out his hand but stopped halfway. "I don't want to lose this." "What is it?" she asked quietly. "Friendship? Or is it something more?" William didn't know what to say. Over the past month, Alice had become a part of his life, a part where he could be himself, where he didn't have to play the role of a successful businessman, where he was valued not for his wealth, but for who he was. "I don't know," he answered honestly. "I only know that when I'm with you, time flies by, and it's never enough." Alice gave him a long look. "Then maybe you should think about it, and about why you are hiding the truth from me." She turned around and walked down the street, her footsteps echoing in the evening silence. William watched her go, feeling a strange mixture of admiration and confusion. For the first time in a long time, someone had rejected him, and not just rejected him, but made him think about his actions. He sat in his car, parked around the corner for a long time, looking at the fading lights of the store. The missed call indicator on the dashboard was flashing, probably something urgent from work again. But now it seemed so far away and unimportant. William took out his phone and dialed his mother's number. "Mom, we need to talk. I think I met a special girl. The same one you've been buying flowers for the last month?" His mother's voice sounded smiling. "Where did you—" he stumbled. "You knew those bouquets weren't for you, right?" "Of course, son. A mother always knows these things." He smiled, feeling his heart warm. "She is special, Mom. But I'm afraid I'm going to ruin it. Then maybe it's time to be honest with her and with myself." William looked at the dark storefront. Yes, perhaps it was time to stop hiding behind the mask of a successful businessman and just be himself. The only question was he ready for the consequences? When Alice came into the store in the morning, there was an envelope on the counter. Inside was a postcard with a picture of a botanical garden and a short note. Not a date, just a walk among the flowers. Saturday, 11 o'clock. V. She turned the card in her hands for a long time, hesitating. 2 weeks had passed since their last conversation. William still came to pick up flowers, but their conversations were shorter, more cautious. "So what do you think you're going to do?" Rose asked, watching her think. "I don't know," Alice sighed. "Julia says it's dangerous. What does your heart say?" The older woman smiled wisely. At that moment, a courier entered the store with a large envelope. "Miss Donovan, a letter from the Small Business Support Fund." Alice opened the envelope in surprise. Her eyes widened with surprise. It's a grant for business development, $30,000. "What?" Rose ran up to her. "But you didn't apply. It says here that my shop was chosen by a recommendation." Alice read the letter over and over again. It was incredible. That evening she texted William. "It's a deal. Let's meet on Saturday." The botanical garden greeted them with warm autumn sunshine. Alice hadn't been here since she was a little girl, when her parents used to take her to see the exotic plants. "You look happy," William said as they walked along the alley. "I am," she smiled. "Imagine, yesterday I received a letter. Our shop got a grant." William tried to look surprised. "Really? That's wonderful. Tell me more about it." They stopped at the greenhouse with the orchids. Alice was enthusiastically talking about her plans to repair the roof, upgrade the cooling system for the flowers, and maybe even hire another assistant. "You sound so inspired when you talk about the shop," William said quietly. "It's not just a shop," she replied. "It's a memory of my parents, their dream. They went into the greenhouse. The air was humid and warm, and hundreds of orchids of different colors were blooming around them. "You know," William suddenly said, stopping at a white orchid, "when my father died, I was 12. He left a huge company that he had been building all his life. My mom didn't want to sell it. She said it was his legacy." Alice listened attentively, feeling that this was the first time he was talking so openly about his past. "I grew up thinking that I had to be worthy of his memory. I went to business school, worked 18 hours a day, and I achieved everything he dreamed of. Except, only what?" Alice asked quietly. "Sometimes I feel so alone," he admitted. "As if everyone sees only my success, my achievements, but not me." Alice touched his hand. "Is that why you haven't told me anything about yourself?" William nodded. "When I came into your shop that rainy day, I had just broken up with a girl. She said I was a walking corporation incapable of real feelings. And you just gave me a bouquet, just like that, from the bottom of your heart. And that's why you kept coming? Yes. With you, I could be just me, not the successful businessman that everyone knows." They approached a bench in a quiet corner of the garden. Chrysanthemums bloomed around them just like the ones in that first bouquet. Alice, William said seriously, I know I've been hiding a lot of things, but believe me, I've never meant to hurt you or to harm you. Just give me some time. I'll tell you everything, I promise. She looked at him for a long time, then nodded. Okay. But you know what's the strangest thing? What? I feel like I can trust you, even without knowing the whole truth. William felt his heart skip a beat. If only she knew that he had organized that grant through his charity, that he couldn't stand to see her struggle with financial problems. Do you want to see something special? He asked, standing up. What is it? There's a greenhouse with rare species of lilies. I've arranged a private tour. Alice's eyes sparkled. Really? But they don't usually let visitors in. Let's just say I have some connections, he smiled. They spent the whole day in the garden. Alice talked about every flower they saw, sharing her knowledge, and William found himself thinking that he could listen to her forever. As the sun began to slant toward the west, they sat on a bench by the fountain eating ice cream. Thank you for today, Alice said. It was special, even if it's not a date? William smiled. Especially if it's not a date, she replied, a playful twinkle in her eye. On the way home, William felt strangely elated. Perhaps it was time to reveal all the cards. But is Alice ready to find out that he is not just a successful businessman, but one of the richest men in town? And would it destroy the special simplicity of their relationship? The day began as usual. Alice was working on her morning orders when the bell above the door announced a visitor. An elegant woman in an expensive suit entered the shop. Good morning, how can I help you? Alice greeted her. So you are the flower girl? The woman looked her up and down. You know, I imagined you to be different. Alice tensed, sensing something wrong in the visitor's tone. I'm sorry, do I know you? Oh no, the woman smiled bitterly. But I've heard a lot about you. I'm Olivia Harrington, the former fiancée of William Kingsley. Have you heard of him? Alice felt the floor shake beneath her feet. William Kingsley? Don't say you didn't know. Olivia came closer. William Kingsley, owner of Kingsley Development, the largest construction company in the city. Billionaire, philanthropist, Forbes's most enviable bachelor of the year. Every word hit like a whip. Alice grabbed the counter to keep from falling. I can see by your face that you really didn't know, Olivia continued. How interesting. Did he tell you stories about the simple guy, too? Why did you come? Alice asked quietly. Olivia took her tablet out of her purse. You know, at first I didn't believe it when they told me that William Kingsley goes to some abandoned flower shop. I thought maybe he was buying something for charity. But then, she showed me photos of William entering the shop, them together in the botanical garden, sitting on a bench and talking. And then I found out about the grant, Olivia laughed bitterly. $30,000 from his charitable foundation. How nice of him, isn't it? Alice felt nausea approaching her throat. Grant, of course it was him. You know what's funny? Olivia continued. He told me he wasn't ready for a serious relationship, that he needed time. And he did. 2 weeks. It was only 2 weeks after we broke up when he first came here. I didn't know, Alice whispered. I swear I didn't know anything. Oh, I believe you, Olivia nodded. William has always been a master manipulator. He finds lonely, vulnerable girls, plays the role of a simple guy. And then that's enough, Alice said sharply. Please leave. As you say, Olivia started for the door but stopped. You know, I didn't come here to hurt you. I wanted him to realize that you can't play with people. When the door closed behind her, Alice slowly sank into a chair. Her hands were shaking as she pulled out her phone and searched for William Kingsley. Hundreds of articles, photos, interviews. A young billionaire who inherited his father's empire and multiplied it tenfold. Charitable projects, social events, luxurious parties. and a photo of William in an impeccable suit against the backdrop of a skyscraper with the words Kingsley on it. The bell rang again. Alice looked up. William was standing on the doorstep with a bouquet of her favorite lilies. "Hello, He stuttered when he saw her face. "What's wrong? Come out," she said softly. "Please, just come out." "Alice?" He took a step forward. "What, Mr. Kingsley?" Her voice turned icy. "I'm asking you to leave my shop." William froze. Fear flashed in his eyes. "You know?" "I know." She stood up, trying to keep her balance. "I know about everything. The company, the money, the grant. About Olivia." "Olivia was here?" His face changed. "Alice, let me explain." "What?" She felt tears rolling down her cheeks. "How you lied to me. How you used your money to do what? To have fun. To prove something to your ex. No." He took another step. "It's not like that. I just what?" she interrupted. "You found a poor girl with problems and decided to play the Good Samaritan to see how happy she would be to get a grant? I wanted to help," he exclaimed. "You were so worried about the shop." "I didn't ask for help," she screamed now. "Especially not like this. You think money solves everything? You think you can just buy people's trust?" William stood there with his arms down. The bouquet of lilies fell to the floor. "I love you," he said quietly. "That's the only truth that matters." Alice shook her head. "No, William. The truth is, you don't even know what real feelings are. You're used to getting whatever you want, but there are things that money can't buy. Give me a chance to explain," he asked. "Please." "Go out," she repeated. "And don't come back. I will return every penny to your foundation." "Alice, get out!" she screamed, her voice breaking into sobs. When he was gone, she slowly sank to the floor among the scattered lilies. Julia was right. Everyone was right. You can't trust people who can buy anything they want, because they will never understand the value of true feelings. William was sitting in his office looking at the city at night. On his desk was a photograph from the botanical garden, the only proof that the past months had not been a dream. A sharp knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he said, without even turning around. "So, are you enjoying your solitude?" Olivia's voice was full of sarcasm. William turned slowly. His eyes were cold. "Why did you do that?" "Oh, so she told you already?" Olivia came closer. "I just opened her eyes to the truth. Isn't that what you wanted?" "The truth? The truth?" He stood up. "You call lies and manipulation truth?" "Lies?" She laughed. "I told her who you were. What's wrong with that? You told her that I play with people, that I look for vulnerable girls, that I use my money for entertainment. Didn't you?" Olivia walked to the window. 2 weeks, William. It's only been 2 weeks since we broke up and you've already found yourself a poor flower girl. How romantic." William felt anger rise inside him. "You know nothing of my feelings for Alice." "Feelings?" She turned to him. "You're cold and emotionless, remember? You said it yourself, and that's why you decided to destroy the only real thing in my life?" His voice became dangerously quiet. Olivia suddenly felt a chill run down her spine. She had never seen him like this. "I'm going to call your father," William continued. "I'm going to tell him how his daughter is trying to destroy the reputation of his company's biggest partner. I wonder what he'll say. You wouldn't dare." But her voice was already trembling. "I would dare. And not only that, I can destroy your career with one call. But you know what? You're not even worth that." Olivia took a step back. "I just wanted to—" "Revenge?" He smiled bitterly. "You have no idea what you've done. Alice, she's special. She saw me as a person, not a wallet, and you've ruined that. William, get out," he said quietly. "And if you ever come near Alice again or try to hurt her, I will forget everything we've ever done." When the door closed behind Olivia, William sank into his chair. He knew what he had to do. The next morning, Alice found an envelope outside the store. Inside was a letter. Alice, I know I don't deserve your trust, but please give me 15 minutes. Just listen to me. Tonight at 7 in the evening, I will be in the park by the fountain where we had ice cream. If you don't come, I'll understand. William. She stared at the letter for a long time before Rose took it from her trembling hands. Go, the older woman said. You can't work until you hear it anyway. What if Julia is right? What if it's all an act? What if it's not? Rose asked softly. What if it's real? At 7 in the evening, Alice stood by the fountain. William showed up right on time, but he looked different, without a suit, in simple jeans and a sweater. Thanks for coming, he said quietly. 15 minutes, she reminded him. Olivia lied, he began. Not about everything, of course. I am indeed William Kingsley, and I am indeed rich, but I have never played with your feelings. And the grant? Her voice trembled. Yes, that was me, and I'm sorry. Not for helping you, for doing it secretly. But I saw how worried you were about the store, and I just couldn't— Couldn't what? She interrupted. Watch that poor girl suffer? I couldn't see the woman I love suffer, he exclaimed. Yes, I made a mistake. Yes, I should have been honest from the beginning. But do you know why I wasn't? Alice looked at him silently. Because for the first time in my life, someone saw me as a human being, not a billionaire, not an heir to an empire, just William, who likes cinnamon coffee and can talk about flowers for hours. He took an envelope out of his pocket. Here, the documents for the return of the grant. I canceled everything, and if you want, I will never come to the shop again. And if I don't want to? She asked quietly. William looked up at her in surprise. You know, Alice continued, I've been thinking all day about everything. And I realized one thing, the William I've known all these months. He's real. Wealth and status are all external. But the man who spoke of loneliness in the botanical garden, who was as happy as a child when I told him about different types of lilies, is this the real you? The real me, he whispered. Then, maybe. She took a step toward him. Maybe we could start over, without secrets and omissions. Really? Hope appeared in his eyes. But this time, honestly, she said firmly, I want to know everything about your work, about your past, about Olivia. Everything, he agreed. I swear. No more secrets. They sat by the fountain for a long time, talking. William talked about the pressure he felt after his father's death, the fear of not living up to expectations, the loneliness of being alone in a world where everyone wants something from you. You know, Alice said as the evening turned into night, maybe we're not so different after all. We're both trying to live up to our parents' expectations. We're both afraid of losing what they left us. And we're both afraid to trust, William added. But maybe, she took his hand, maybe it's time to stop being afraid. Are you sure about this? Alice watched William take off his expensive watch. It's not necessary. It is, he replied, carefully putting things in a box. I want to prove not only to you, but also to myself that I can be a different person. A week passed after their conversation at the fountain. William had made a decision. He would take a month's vacation from running the company, leave his penthouse, and try to live a normal life. He was going to start by volunteering at Flower Paradise. But your company, Alice began. Martha will do a great job, he smiled, remembering his deputy. She's been telling me for a long time that I'm a workaholic and need a break. The very first morning, William realized how different real work was from what he had imagined. Waking up at 5 to go to the wholesale market to buy fresh flowers was a real challenge. Don't sleep. Alice nudged him cheerfully as he yawned over the roses. The day is just beginning. They spent 3 hours picking out the best flowers. William had never thought it was such a complicated science to check the freshness of the buds, the strength of the stems, the color of the leaves. Now, I understand why your bouquets are so special, he said. helping me load the boxes into the shop's old truck. My parents always said that if you do something, do it with love, Alice replied. The days flew by. William learned how to make bouquets, communicate with customers, and understand the varieties of flowers. His hands, accustomed to the laptop keyboard, were now scratched by thorns and green from the leaves. I never thought I'd see a billionaire washing buckets. Rose laughed as she watched him clean the back room. A former billionaire, he winked, at least for this month. But most importantly, he could see Alice's eyes changing. Distrust was gradually disappearing, giving way to warmth and tenderness. "You know," she said one evening when they were writing up the day's report together, "you could have just said you've changed. You didn't have to go through all this." "It was necessary," he interrupted, "because I didn't know what I was capable of. All my life I was surrounded by people who did everything for me. And here you have to wash yourself after working with fertilizers?" She laughed. "That too," he smiled. "But the main thing is that I have never felt so alive." One evening, as they were closing up shop, a luxurious black Bentley drove by. Olivia was driving it. When she saw William sweeping the sidewalk in front of the store, she braked sharply. "Seriously?" she shouted out the window. "The great William Kingsley is a janitor?" Alice tensed, but William calmly continued his work. "You've made the biggest mistake of your life," Olivia continued to shout. "Look at you! You could have had it all!" William finally looked up. "I already have everything I need. You're going to regret this," she snapped and abruptly moved away. "Don't mind me," Alice said quietly, walking over to him. "She's just—" "You know what's the funniest thing?" he interrupted. "Before, I would have been worried about words like that. I would have thought about my reputation, what people would say. And now—" He looked at his hands in his gardening gloves. "Now I just feel calm." Later that evening, they sat on the roof of the shop. William had set up a small garden here, his first independent project. "I never thought I'd see you growing tomatoes," Alice smiled. "I didn't think so either," he replied. "You know, all my life I've been trying to live up to someone else's expectations. My father's, the board of directors, society's. And here I can just be myself. And what is the real William Kingsley like? Someone who likes to wake up early to see roses blooming. Someone who can spend hours listening to Rose's stories about her grandchildren. Someone who feels for the first time in his life that he is doing something really important." Alice put her head on his shoulder. "You know what I see? A man who has finally found his way. Not the one someone drew for her, but her own." They sat in silence for a long time, looking at the stars. The city was noisy below, and the skyscrapers of the Kingsley development could be seen in the distance, but it all seemed so distant and unimportant. "The month will be over soon," Alice said quietly. "Will you go back to your life?" William turned to her. "You know, I think it's possible to combine both worlds. You can be a successful businessman and not lose yourself. The main thing is to remember that true values are not measured by money." "And what are they?" she asked with a smile. Instead of answering, he kissed her, gently and carefully, like the most precious flower in the world. And somewhere below, a black car was flying by, and its driver could not understand how anyone could trade a luxurious life for some flower shop. But perhaps this was the difference between real happiness and its illusion. Autumn was gradually turning into winter, and Flower Paradise was preparing for the holiday season. Alice was decorating the window with Christmas arrangements when William came in with 2 cups of coffee. "Cinnamon, as always," he said, handing her the drink. "Thank you," she smiled. "I didn't think you'd come in today. You had an important meeting. That's why I'm here," he replied. "I have some news to share." After a month of working in the store, William returned to running the company, but something had changed. He started a small business support program, this time in an open and transparent way. and he spent much more time with Alice, finding a work-life balance. "We are opening a network of social greenhouses," he said, "in every district of the city where people can grow flowers and learn floristry, and I want you to be the head of this project." Alice put down her coffee. "But my shop." "The shop will remain yours," he quickly added. "It will be a side project. You'll be able to share your knowledge with others, help people find themselves, just like you helped me." Her eyes filled with tears. "You are incredible, you know." "Wait, that's not all." He began to pull out various flowers from his pockets. "Do you remember every single one of them?" Alice watched as he placed the flowers on the counter. "White chrysanthemums, our first meeting. Starry night lilies, your first visit as a customer. Orchids from the botanical garden." With each flower he added a new one until he made a whole bouquet of their stories. "And this one." He took out the last flower, a small red rose, "is our future." He got down on one knee and Alice's heart sank. "Alice Donovan," he said, taking out a small velvet box, "you taught me that true love is like a flower. It needs to be nurtured, cared for, and then it will bloom into the most beautiful color. You showed me what it means to be real, that happiness is not in money and status, but in the simple moments of life. Will you be my wife?" Tears rolled down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." They hugged each other among the flowers that had witnessed their story. The story of how simple sincerity melted the ice around the heart of a successful businessman, and how true love proved to be stronger than all prejudice and doubt. "You know," Alice said as they later sat in their rooftop garden, "my parents always said that love is like a garden. You have to take care of it all the time, but the result is worth all the effort. And we will tend our garden together," William replied, kissing her hand with the new ring. There were still many challenges ahead, combining two different worlds, public opinion and working on joint projects. But they knew that they would overcome any obstacles together, because their love blossomed among the flowers, sincere and real, like nature itself.